Hello readers! I'm coming to you a little bit late with my February reading wrap up. Before I get into what I read in February, I want to talk about the Libri Labra book club. We just recently finished The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I will go ahead and link to our discussion in the description below. For the month of March, we'll be reading Nevernight by J. Kristoff. If you haven't read it yet, I welcome you to read it with us, and if you have already read it, then be sure to join us in the discussion towards the end of the month. For the month of February, I finished 5 books, the first one being Artemis by Andy Weir. Artemis is a sci-fi that takes place on Artemis and follows the character Jazz. Jazz Bashara is somewhat of a criminal and lives in a really small apartment. She's looking for that next job and the big payoff. I actually listened to the audiobook for this one, which was narrated by Rosario Dawson, and she did an excellent job. Jazz is kind of one of the guys and a bit of a badass herself. People have compared Artemis to The Martian, but since I haven't read that, I can't do any kind of comparisons. For an introduction into Andy Weir, I did enjoy it. I may have tuned out a little bit here and there when it got like super sciencey, but outside of that, I enjoyed the story and I would definitely pick up another Andy Weir book. I watched several reviews from other people who said that they felt that Jazz was clearly written by a male because of the way that she talked about herself and how she was perceived by others. While listening to the book, I didn't really feel that. She didn't feel strange to me. I didn't have any trouble believing that she was a female. She wasn't really super feminine or high maintenance, but again, I didn't see anything wrong with her. I still found her character to be believable. As one of the judges for the YA BookTube Awards, I ended up reading Eliza and Her Monsters, and I enjoyed this book so much. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. She has a very famous online persona that nobody in her real life actually knows about. Eliza struggles to make connections and friendships with people in her real life, and she works really hard at her webcomic. You could say she's kind of obsessive about it. There's a bit of a romance in here, but what I really love about Eliza and Her Monsters was the portrayal of online relationships. As a graphic designer, somebody who struggles with anxiety, and also someone who feels a lot more comfortable online than they do in real life, I really connected with Eliza's character, and I absolutely loved the story. Also, as part of the YA BookTube Awards, I read Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. This is another book that deals with anxiety, but also OCD. It is an Own Voices book, since John Green does deal with some of those same things. I'm sure there's like 1,000,001 people that have reviewed Turtles All the Way Down, and so I don't really want to jump into it too far, but one of the things that a lot of people were saying were that the whole mystery plot just wasn't needed, and I don't agree with that at all. Yes, the story was mostly about Aza and her issues, but I think it was important to see what her relationships were like, not just with her best friend Daisy, but with Davis as well. The other thing I heard people mention was that they felt like Daisy was just a really shitty best friend, and I think she may have rubbed me the wrong way a little bit towards the beginning, but at one point they kind of had this argument, and Daisy reveals a lot that made me feel a lot more empathetic towards her. I read Turtles All the Way Down both as an audiobook and as the book, and a lot of people have mentioned that reading it does feel like you're in the middle of a panic attack. I was really concerned about this when I started it because I've had that experience reading other things, like I read Furiously Happy, and that kind of triggered that occasionally. I think it might have been the fact that I sped the book up that it didn't quite impact me the way I was expecting it to. But if you suffer from anxiety and you are familiar with what a panic attack feels like, this book could potentially make you uncomfortable. But John Green definitely does capture that feeling pretty well. Like, you spend the majority of the time inside Aza's head, struggling with her thought spirals, struggling with the thoughts that she can't seem to escape. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I would recommend it to others. The next book I read was Otherworld by Jason Segel and Kirsten Miller, and I read this as part of Respawnathon, which was a video game related readathon that I hosted along with Kat from For the Love of Books and Reading and Rachel from Rachel Ray. Otherworld takes place in both the real world and a virtual world called Otherworld. The story follows main character Simon. Simon is not an insanely likable character. There were a few parts that I didn't love about Otherworld. For example, at one point, Simon is trying to defend his female best friends when he overhears 2 other girls slut-shaming her, and his solution was to threaten them, saying he was going to acquire nudie pics of them and spread them all over the place. The intention was good, but that was a really poor way to handle it, I think. There's just another point where he's describing one of the females, and he mentions that she has nice knockers. Knockers? Really? Is that where we're at right now? Jason Segel has a very unique sense of humor, and I don't think it's gonna fly with everyone, so that's just something to be aware of. I gave Otherworld 3 out of 5 stars, and it is the first book in a series. So as of right now, I do think I will be continuing on with the series, but I didn't love it as much as I was expecting to. The other thing to be aware of is that it kind of ends really abruptly, and not that it necessarily ends on a cliffhanger, but it's like almost like the story just stops and it kind of feels incomplete. The last book I read, which was also for Respawnathon, is the Overwatch Anthology Volume 1. This provided backstory for a lot of the Overwatch characters, although it did not provide backstory for all of them. So it is the first anthology. I imagine there will be a few more. I myself have only played Overwatch a couple of times. I've mentioned in previous videos that I do suffer from simulation sickness, so I haven't really been able to play too many first-person shooters lately, but I was excited to get some backstory on these Blizzard characters because I think that's something Blizzard's really good at. If you'd like to see a full review for any of these books, please go ahead and leave me a comment down below. If you like my pink hair, be sure to subscribe and don't forget to hit the bell to be notified when I upload new videos. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.